Welcome, everyone. Dr. Reid and Dr. Chiang and I, Dr. Johnson, are really grateful to be here with you today as we navigate these really challenging times um, after the wildfires in our community. And I know we're all thinking about how can we support our own resilience and our children's resilience, especially our school-age children, which is our focus today. Um, and then also, how do we work with all of the big feelings of loss and grief and anger, and find hope and connection. So today we want to provide you with some really solid research-based and experience-wise information that we hope will be very empowering to you as you navigate this journey, as we're all navigating this journey. And to give you a little bit of context, if you're not familiar with the Institute and Flourish, we are a mission-driven therapy practice here in Pasadena. We work with all ages and all genders through both the Institute for Girls Development and Flourish Therapy and Wellness Center. We have three initiatives to provide empowering, culturally responsive, and developmentally informed therapy to children and adults, all ages, all genders. Um, our second initiative is to provide empowering and informative community education. Our free webinar series, like the one today, is part of our community education commitment. And we believe really strongly in um, being able to take this the science-based and experience-based uh, information that can be so helpful to families as we now navigate stresses and challenges. Um, we have made recordings of all of the webinars that we've been doing since the fires. And if you aren't familiar with them, haven't seen them, when we send our follow-up email on Friday after this webinar, you'll get the links to all of the webinars, all of the free webinars that we have been doing over the last month. So check those out if those would be of interest and supportive to you. And then finally, we have our initiative for professional training, where we work with mental health professionals, educators, health professionals, youth program leaders to address the really relevant topics, which right now in this time is how do we help children and families navigate after a disaster of any kind, but certainly of this magnitude. I am I am Dr. Melissa Johnson, and I'm the founder of both the Institute and Flourish. I'm a psychologist and a former educator. I have gone to high school in this community. I have lived in this community for over 40 years, and I know that the personal impact on me has certainly been significant as I just go through this with friends and colleagues and families. So it's very meaningful to be able to be having this conversation today. There are a few things that we know. And we're going to be sharing those from our hearts today. This is a long road of recovery, and we will all go through different stages, have different experiences. Um, Now, 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now, and beyond. So, giving you some context for the right here, right now responses that we're all seeking, and also to have some of that perspective about the the long and meaningful road of healing and how to be compassionate and flexible with ourselves and our children in the process. I think as Vicki, as Dr. Chiang and Dr. Reid and I have been talking, I think that's one thing that really stands out to me is the value and the importance of being able to be compassionate and being able to be flexible in a time like this. And finally, the other theme that really comes up for all three of us is leaning into community. As my friend Dr. Francisco Navarro shares, and he and I talked about this last week in our webinar, community is medicine. Community is medicine. And just really thinking today, as you listen to Dr. Chiang and Dr. Reid sharing their deep wisdom, um, I think these are some of the themes that you will be empowered to incorporate even more in your daily life as we navigate this together. Dr. Chang, share a little bit about yourself and and your why for being here today.
Hi, everyone. I'm so grateful to be in this space with all of you. Similar to what Dr. Johnson said, I'm someone who grew up in this community, works here, and is raising my own kids here. So the impact of these fires is a deeply personal one for me as well. One of the things I'm most passionate about in my clinical work here at the Institute is working with parents. And one of the things I love doing with parents is actually helping them build a village of support around themselves. I'm really grateful to be sharing this space because I hope all of you feel like you are less alone on this journey. Like Dr. Johnson mentioned, it's a long road and we'll need each and all of us to be together. And we have a collective wisdom to share, and that it's great to be here sharing that with all of you.
Dr. Reid, um, I, share a little bit about yourself and your why for being here today.
Yeah, well, thank you all for being here and thanks for having me back. My name's Dr. Ashlee Reid, and I'm a child psychologist here at the Institute, and I work with young children and their families. And like I shared last time in our other webinar about how to support young children, one of the things that I am most passionate about is early intervention, because we know that when children receive support early on, it makes a huge difference in how they heal and how they can move forward from traumatic events like this. So right now, I think also many of us are seeing this firsthand, how children are really struggling with what has happened, which also understandably is leaving many parents and adults wondering, is this okay? Is my child okay? What can I do to help them? So I'm really excited to explore that together this afternoon.
Actually, that's the perfect segue into what we wanted to start with. One of the you mentioned parents are really wondering, is is this new behavior that I'm seeing okay? What just so many questions about our kids and the we're here. We saw that in the questions that people put in their registrations for today, and we really appreciate those questions that you've put in. And we're hearing it every day in the conversations that we have. So, Ashlee, why don't you start us off by talking about some of the things to think about with 6 to 8 year olds, 9 to 11 year olds,
Mhm.
because that developmentally informed response is so critical.
Yeah, it's a lot, isn't it? I think that one of the biggest takeaways from our conversations with kids, with parents, with educators, is that kids of different ages are processing this disaster in different ways, which is very much in alignment with what we know about research into child development. So I think that, as you just mentioned, I'll break my explanation down into different age groups because there is such huge variability in how elementary school age children process the world. And where we are developmentally really determines how we perceive the world and how we're able to cope with our experiences. So maybe I can start with younger elementary school age children, like you said, maybe 6 to 8 year olds, or we're thinking first through third grade. If we're thinking about how they process the world, their experiences are still relatively concrete, right? They're more focusing on what they saw from these events, what they heard, what they physically experienced, things like fallen trees, sirens that they heard, or the way that their parents were rushing to evacuate that night or day when everyone was leaving their homes. So many of them might not be dwelling on the fire itself if they didn't see it directly, but they're really focused on how their day-to-day life has changed. And for many of the kids that we're connecting with right now, that's the case. Some are really struggling with being displaced from their homes. Others are adjusting to new routines or even new schools. And many of them are still seeing these visual reminders of what has happened, which can be unsettling. I know even in my own neighborhood, I still see the fallen trees. I still see the broken windows, right? So every day you're getting these visual reminders of what has happened. And that can be unsettling when life seems to be going on as normal. So at this age, children are also very rule oriented. If you've spent time with a first through third grader, you know that they love rules. So they love structure. They're trying to make sense also of what's happened and cope with what has happened by coming up with rules in their mind. So I've had parents tell me that their child now insists that they always leave the home whenever they hear sirens outside, or that they have to have their emergency bags packed at all times, right? So it's important to understand that when younger children, we're thinking 6 to 8 year olds, are acting this way, it's really them trying to develop a sense of control and predictability following a very unpredictable situation. We can also see that younger elementary school age kids in general, they're very hard on themselves when they feel like they don't handle something right. So following the wildfires, some of them are feeling guilty almost if they didn't grab an important toy or item before evacuating their home. Others might feel bad that they don't want to donate their favorite toy or book or stuffed animal, because for these younger elementary school age kids, it can still be hard to hold two emotions at the same time, that we really want to help and that we, feel for people who have lost everything, but also we really like our things and our stuff. They can really be struggling with those pieces. And for parents who are noticing that their child seems reluctant to share or doesn't appear as worried as others, I've been hearing this as well. I also just really want to reassure parents that this is completely developmentally appropriate as well. At this stage or these ages, children are really still developing these perspective taking skills. So while they do really care about others and their community, their thinking might be largely self-focused. So that doesn't mean that they lack empathy. Of course, it just means that they're still learning how to balance their emotions with the emotions of people around them. So these are some of the things that I'm seeing and that I'm thinking about in interacting with younger elementary school age kids. So now just a little bit about older elementary school age children. So if we're thinking 9 to 12 or maybe 4th through 6th grade, we see a huge shift, right? Their thinking is becoming much more abstract as a product of development. So a lot of them are starting to ask what if questions, right? What if our house had also burned down? What if this happens again? And what I'm hearing a lot is, what if the next disaster is even worse? So unlike younger children who tend to focus on the immediate and more tangible effects of these wildfires, older kids are looking ahead, right? Some of them are feeling a very strong sense of anticipatory anxiety. They're wondering what the next disaster will be. And if, we think about the life experiences of this cohort of children, that's really fair. I mean, for many of them, this isn't their first major disruption to their life. Most of them, they still remember the pandemic. They feel earthquakes regularly here in California. They participate in regular school shooting drills. And so they're really piecing together this narrative about the world that is really scary. It's really scary. And so it's important to know this about our older elementary school age kids, that if they're having reactions to the fires that seem disproportionate to their individual experience, it very well might be that they are considering tragedy on just a much larger scale. And then before I wrap up, the last thing that I'll share is just that a big shift in this age group too is the role of peer relationships. So older kids are thinking about how they fit into their social group just in general. So at this time, I've been hearing from these older children who have lost their homes. They now feel like the different one among their friends, right? Everyone's looking at me. People are talking about me. Others maybe still have homes, but they feel guilty around their classmates who don't, or friends who don't. And not to mention, some are even starting in new schools and they're feeling like their entire world has shifted, right? And for those kids in new schools, people know who they are, right? They might be like a LA fire kid, right? And so it's just a really difficult time, even socially, for these kids.
Thank you, Dr. Reid. And Dr. Chiang, are there things that you're thinking about just in terms of developmental responses that would be helpful to keep in mind before we shift to talking about and how do we respond to this in ways that can be helpful to our kids?
Yeah, I mean, Ashlee, you did a beautiful job just sort of highlighting all of that. And I think the one thing I might add is that reminding ourselves that little ones, particularly in our early elementary school age, and even our sort of upper elementary, their language can be very limited in how to describe how they feel. So allowing all different types of ways of expression. It can be very troubling to parents to see kids drawing pictures of buildings and homes on fire, or reenacting maybe, because it can be perhaps, oh no, what's going on? But just remember and remind yourself, if they can't talk it out, they need to play it out. So finding and normalizing that. And actually what can be really beautiful is actually helping them reenact or play out or draw out oh, this family got out safely. You drew a picture of them happy in this safe home. Oh, the firefighters came and are putting out the fire. That's a really typical, it's a need for children to be able to express in those ways because they don't always have the language. I describe to the parents I work with, it's like you and I calling our very best friend after this happened and said, oh my gosh, can you believe what happened? Let me tell you what exactly when I heard the first evacuation alert. Like when we go through it with our friends, this is how children also use their other ways of playing it out, acting it out, and drawing it out. That's their way of expressing how it's been feeling. So being curious and being open to that is something that is just to be mindful about.
Yes, I'm reminded of Ashlee, Dr. Reid, your conversation when we talked about young children and the importance of storytelling, and that we do tell it's imperative that we have ways of telling our stories. And Dr. Chiang, as you noted, there aren't always the words, but they can draw and they can enact it and they can play it with their stuffies or their other, dolls and action figures and all of that. So helping them to be able to do that, which is a perfect segue to how can we emotionally support children during this time. Dr. Reid, do you want to speak
Sure. Yeah.
more about this?
Sure. Maybe the first thing to emphasize is just that there's really no one right way for a child to respond to a disaster like this. And therefore, there's really no one right way to support them, right? We have to see what it is that they're feeling, how they're processing, and meet them where they are. Some kids, they're asking millions of questions, of course, and then others don't want to talk about it at all. And to kind of piggyback off of this conversation of language development too, for these older kids, they now are gaining this capacity in terms of language development to really think their thoughts in their mind and not out loud or not concretely with toys. And so they might actually be more quiet. And so, we might want to check in with them if we notice that they're more withdrawn. But yeah, and then some kids will seem totally fine for weeks, and they have seemed relatively fine. And now all of a sudden they're having these big feelings come up later. So this is all typical. It's all to be expected. What matters most really isn't whether their reactions are the same as ours or what we expect. It's just that we as the adults in their lives can meet them where they are and support them in a way that fits their developmental stage. So maybe I can break down my recommendations again based on these two age groups. For more of the younger elementary school age kids, so we think first through third grade, one of the most important things that we can do is provide them with what you were saying, these concrete explanations of what's happened and predictability. Again, because they're still developing like more logical thinking skills, they do process the world again in very literal and rule-based ways. So they're paying very close attention to what has happened and how this affects their daily life. So you might notice that younger elementary school age kids are becoming very focused on rules and routines right now, right? If your 6 or 7-year-old is suddenly insisting that you're checking your emergency bags and exits, or that they always have on sneakers in case they need to run away, right? Or leave a building. Again, that's their way of trying to regain a sense of control from what has happened. So as much as possible, we really want to give them small, predictable routines to help them feel safe, even if their actual surroundings have changed. Another key thing for this age group is that they're still learning how to take the perspectives of other people, like I said, so they might be more focused on what has happened to them than others. So parents might think like, my child doesn't really seem as upset about everything that's happened, and that concerns me. Or maybe they don't know how to help, or they don't want to donate, and I'm really concerned about this. So again, I really want to reassure parents that this is not a sign of selfishness. It's really a sign of where your kids are developmentally. For these younger kids too, they're still shifting their thinking from themselves to thinking about other people. So instead of talking about empathy exactly, we can help them experience success in small ways. Like if they're struggling to donate some of their toys, for example, you can let them help you pack donations or make a meal for a family, or invite someone over for a play date. And if they're reluctant to share their space with another family, I'm hearing a lot of families are in this situation, right? We can acknowledge how hard it is while also reinforcing like you're such a helper, right? And if they feel bad, again, for this age group, there can be a lot of guilt of not doing the right thing. So if you're noticing that these themes are coming up for them and they feel bad that they didn't do something right during this process, we can really highlight their successes, like how they've listened, right, to be safe during evacuations, or we're so proud of them for going to play with their friends or going to a new space. And then lastly, I think for them, we can also focus on real people as role models. I don't know if everyone notices, but there tends to be this shift when kids start elementary school where they don't like superheroes as much, and they're really interested in real role models. They go from liking, Superman to liking LeBron James and Taylor Swift, right? So one way to help them feel empowered also is you can introduce them to stories of people who have experienced similar things that they admire, or also stories of real helpers, firefighters, volunteers. You can read some of these news articles together, because for them, knowing that someone that they look up to who has also gone through something similar can be really reassuring. So that's recommendations for the younger kids. And then for some of the older children, especially those in maybe 4th through 6th grade, they're in a very different stage of development, like we just talked about. So unlike the younger kids who tend to focus on the here and now, again, older kids are thinking abstractly and they're thinking about the future. They're thinking, again, like, what if this happens again? What if the next disaster is worse? What if my family isn't prepared enough next time? So for those kids, feeling powerless can be so unsettling. So one of the best ways that we can support them is also by giving them ways to feel prepared and to feel in control. So instead of saying something like, don't worry, this isn't going to happen again, which we hope for, but we also can't guarantee, right? We can shift the conversation also into acknowledging their feelings and also problem solving. So you can say, like, I hear that you're worried about another fire happening. What do you think we could do to be ready if something like this happened again? Or if we had to leave our house quickly for any reason, what are 3 things that you would want to take with you? Where can we put them so that they're safe, right? Can even ask, what do you think firefighters do to stop fires from spreading? How do you think that works? So by doing things like this, we can also help them channel that anticipatory anxiety into planning, which can also help them feel more in control. And then again, going back to relationships. So they're extremely socially aware, and a lot of them are struggling not just with their own feelings, but with how they fit into their group, right? If they're similar or different to how other people who have not navigated the situation. So I've had kids this age group say things like, I don't know what to say to my friend who lost their home, or I feel weird because I still have all my things, but my friend doesn't. Or I don't want to talk about this because it makes me uncomfortable. People look at me weird, right? So for parents, one of the best ways to support your older kids is by acknowledging also those social challenges that they're facing. You can say something like, yeah, that makes sense that you don't know what to say to your friend who lost everything. You might even share or disclose some of your own feelings. Like, I also don't really know what to say, but just letting them know that we care, that's enough. Or, it's normal to feel uncomfortable when big things happen to your friends. I feel the same way. We don't have to be perfect. We just have to be there. So those are some of the things that come to my mind. And maybe lastly, just knowing that the older that kids are, the more creative also that they can be in expressing their feelings. So we see kids making songs or writing poems or playlists to really process how they're feeling throughout all of this. So if you do have a bit of an older elementary school age kid, that might be something that you do with them as well.
Dr. Reid, there were a few things that I was thinking about in terms of my own conversations with kids and teachers and parents. Excuse me. And I was thinking about how frequently right now I am talking about comfort and control, and how frequently we're talking about what would bring some comfort right now, what would bring a sense of control right now. And I think what you're talking about are these really great ways with younger elementary school age and older to help them increase their sense of comfort and control. And I think for all of us right now, comfort and control is so vital. One of the things that I think I really appreciate too about what you're saying is this idea of helping them understand that their experience is understandable.
Mhm.
And that I find myself using the phrases, I know that a lot of kids are feeling this right now. In fact, I know a lot of kids and grown-ups that are feeling this right now. And then being able to move into conversations about greater comfort and greater control while validating um, these feelings that may be quite mysterious to them.
Of course. And yeah, I think that this is something that I hear most often is my child won't tell me how they feel. And I think what's more likely is that they don't really know how they feel because younger children, they're still in this process. I mean, even as adults, we're still in this process of holding multiple feelings at once. It's confusing. I don't know if they know, right? So yeah, we can tell them what we see, share how we're feeling, how other people are feeling. Absolutely.
Um, Dr. Chang, you have some things to add. You've been thinking about
Um,
this a lot too.
Yeah, I think in my work with parents, I always start with a particular or two things I like to focus on. And this is related to helping kids navigate feelings about this or really any big feeling. And one, which Dr. Johnson, you mentioned, was just validation. I call validation empathy plus. It's a two-step process. So empathy is I can understand how you feel, or I'm seeing this experience through your eyes. Validation is taking it one step further by letting them know, yes, that makes sense. It is hard to know what to say to a friend. That makes sense when they've lost their home. I don't know what to say either. Validation helps somebody feel really seen. I see you. I understand you. I get it. And so that's really what we want our children to experience when they are having and demonstrating a really big feeling about really anything. Now, I've talked with parents where they're in the midst of this collective trauma that we've all been in, helping family and friends, and the child says, "Wait a minute, so and so's house burned down, and now I probably can't even have that sleepover." And how quickly it is as a parent, we want to say, "That's not the important thing right now. They don't have a home." Right? Of course, we really jump into that place, but where we might be able to pause is from a worldview of the child. That was the most exciting thing that was going to happen, and that's changed. So we may step into start with validation. It says, I know when our plans change, it's hard. And me too. I loved going to that home, and I thought we would be back there, but we can't, and that's hard. So that's what validation is. The other piece of this is co-regulation. I explained co-regulation to parents as it's really just sharing our calm body in the space with a dysregulated body, and just that sharing your calm can help the other body calm down too. As we get older, we learn a lot of strategies to regulate our own selves, right? Those of us who jumped back into work and we really just sort of pulled ourselves together, we have those skills. Our children don't, which is why co-regulation is so effective for children as a parent, is to be in that space to share our calm with them. Now you might be saying, "Oh my gosh, on Wednesday, the day after the fires, and I was receiving those stream of texts, learning about our dear friends, I was not calm. I was actually very distressed, and maybe I was really emotional." So you might find it funny that I'm actually also saying it is and still okay that you showed and demonstrated your emotions. What's scary to children when we show our emotions and big emotions is that they feel like they don't know what to do with it, and they might have to care for us. So you might have found yourself in a position where you, like myself, was very emotional that day. And the important thing that you are modeling is, one, you're human, and humans express emotions, and crying is a part of human experience. Um, and that we circle back with them, and you might, with the little one, say, you might have seen mommy cry a lot this month, huh? I've been very sad. And that's okay. But you know what? Here's what I'm doing to take care of myself. So that's how we sort of help them. And that's part of co-regulation. I felt sad. You saw me become sad, but I found a way to care for myself. And this is how I did it. I took a deep breath. I called Aunt so-and-so and I talked with her about it. So you can demonstrate how you've been coping with those emotions. So just remember those few things, or just some of the things that I've been working with parents a lot on in these past few weeks, is really just how they can validate feelings, use their body to regulate, and model how to regulate, and really sort of being very gentle on ourselves that these emotions are normal. And I actually just want to add one more thing about sort of helping children get back to their typical childhood experiences. That's the play dates, that's martial arts lessons and dance class and fun things on the weekends. We're in the long haul here, like Dr. Johnson said in the beginning. It's really hard. Getting kids back in that routine is really important and really healing for them. Natural disasters have a way of halting those things, right? If you've moved into a home, lost a home, you're sharing a space, children's lives get disrupted and paused a bit. We saw this really significantly during the pandemic when the stay-at-home order went into effect. So really helping them being intentional about it, that you might be more intentional than you normally would to meet up with their friends at Yogurtland after school on a Friday, which is what I find myself doing a whole lot these days, or just helping them get back to a sense of normalcy, because it helps them in really amazing ways to feel like, okay, some of the things that I'm used to doing are not completely taken away from me.
No. Dr. Chiang, thank you so much. One of the questions that I know we've all been getting related to this last point that you made is, what about feeling guilty about doing normal things, or feeling like it's not okay to laugh, or it's not okay to have a moment of joy? I know that children may feel that, adults may feel that. It's one, again, it's one of those common responses. How are you helping parents navigate that and understand it for themselves and their children?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Survivor's guilt is big and strong, and it is significant, something to pay attention to. Don't minimize those feelings for yourself. I think one of the things I introduced to parents and older elementary, maybe middle school and our teens, this idea that feelings are not fact. Our little ones are going to be having a little hard time understanding that. But survivor's guilt, the way I like to talk about that is to remind ourselves that, well, first, what is guilt? Guilt is I've done something. It's our moral compass, right? I did something intentionally to harm something else, and now I feel guilty after. So we can check the facts on that guilt. Does that make sense in this situation? So it might be, I feel guilty, but I am not guilty. Those are two things that are true in that moment, right? I feel this way. And the reason why we feel guilty is because we are humans with a really caring heart. So that's one of the things I start with when I'm working with parents who have a home that's standing and living on a street that most of their neighbors do not. I start with, you have a caring, loving heart, and that's why that survivor's guilt is so strong right now. So just like turning that compassion towards yourself. Even though you have that feeling, it doesn't mean you are guilty. So with a child that's a little bit older who can't hold the abstract, so we're looking at that upper elementary age, they may be able to understand and distinguish those two things. But what we can start to do with younger kids and above is to how we hold two things at the same time, the happy and the sad, the joy and the heartache, that those two things can happen. And you might say to your friend, it's so fun to laugh with your friend, and we can feel sad that they lost their home too. Well, let's see. I wonder what we do when we feel sad or when we're worried about somebody. Can we write them a card afterwards and say, I'm thinking about you and I hope to see you soon. Let's go to the park soon. So something like that is to help them it's the both and here, and using that language to help them different, that the joy and sad coexist together. Again, much harder to grasp as a younger little one, but you can start to use that language, and you can put it to other things that they may have had experience to. I like to use Disneyland as an example of a both and. So you might say, remember at Disneyland when it's so fun to be there, but also you have to wait in really long lines and it's really hot and you get hungry and grumpy? Yeah, that's the both and. So we can place that example to a child to say, this is a situation where we're trying to hold two things that feel opposite. And when we do that, we help them see that survivor's guilt and guilt in general is here. It's not accurate. We're not guilty of this, but we do feel guilty because we have caring and compassionate hearts.
I love that, Dr. Chang. And Dr. Reid, you have some thoughts too about navigating the big feelings and the complicated, mixed feelings that children have.
Y- Yes, I do. I think that really just going back to what we've been saying this entire time, the validation is really helpful. And also the modeling, like was just being mentioned, is really helpful for kids, for them to see, okay, when mom feels sad, when dad feels sad or frustrated, angry, this is what they do. Maybe I can join them in that, right? It's modeling. So I think that's maybe all that I'll add to what was just shared because I think it was perfect.
Another question that understandably comes up and that we're having lots of conversations about these days is, how do I know if my child needs something more than what I'm able to give them at home, what they're able to get at school in terms of support, or when with our extended family? Um, when do I think about a support group? When do I think about a an individual therapist or a family therapist to help us? Um,
I
Dr.
mean,
Chiang, do you want to
yeah, I
take
could
that?
jump
Yeah,
in.
talk about that.
This is something I talk about with parents I work with all the time. They're always wondering, when should I bring my child in for additional professional support? I always start with, you never have to wait. You don't have to be experiencing anything. There's no symptom checklist that you have to have. If at any moment you say to yourself and your child, you know what, I think it'd be helpful just to have somebody on our team to help us sort things out. And this person's has gone to school for a long time just to learn about feelings, and they're going to help us out. You should feel free to always call to make sure that you're getting and asking for the additional support, so you don't have to. And I also recognize that there are certain markers, and I like to think about it in these three ways, in these three words. I think about an uptick in duration, intensity, and frequency of any sort of emotion or behavioral change. So that might be sadness, that the time they spend feeling sad is longer, it's more intense, meaning the crying feels bigger, and it's more frequent. So whenever there's those three things, and I'm noticing that those three things are there's an increase of it, meaning it's lasting longer, it feels more intense, and it's frequent, that's when that's the pause that says, I think I should maybe seek out additional support for my family or my child or myself. So those are just some things that I like to think about. Anything that's outside of the typical sort of like, I call it, God, they're just not themselves. And so as the parent, and the intuition you have as a parent that just feels like something feels off, something feels a little bit, I don't know what it is. That's also a good time to say, maybe I should get an additional person to help support me to figure out, should I bring my child in, or should I bring my child in to see somebody and have them just get another objective point of view and in a safe space to work through what they're working through right now.
Dr. Reid, do you have anything in addition to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I have the same thoughts, and I might just add as well that also for parents, if you, and understandably so, are not feeling like yourself, and
Mhm.
you also feel that you could benefit from additional support, whether that's a therapist for yourself, or I like, I mean, as a clinician myself, I like to think that I am joining a family as an additional piece of support. So if you'd like to add another either community like a group or a clinician to your circle of support during this time, because you also feel off or feel like you could benefit, I think that that's also something to consider. And I just like to emphasize too, therapy really helps children and adults and families organize their experiences, develop coping tools, and feel more in control of their emotions, right? And better understand their emotions. So if you feel that you or your child could benefit from those things, it's a great idea to pursue therapy. Absolutely.
Mhm.
And there are a lot of great resources available, a variety of resources available right now in our community, which I'm so grateful for. And both what we have here and what some of our really respected colleagues are offering as well. One of the things that I I think about in thinking about how we respond, um, the phrase, do you want help? Do you want to be heard? Or do you want to be hugged? Um, I think captures a lot of what we've talked about today. Helped, heard, hugged. And as we help our children and ourselves find greater comfort and control, we can do that through listening. We can do that through hugging. And we can do that with practical help. And finding a therapist or a support group can be part of that practical help. We can find, as you've both said, somebody in a in addition to our family. So we are expanding our circle of helpers in our lives. Um, and when I have conversations right now, just in order to support that sense of control, um, thinking about asking, what do you want right now? What is it that you need? Help in a practical way, or to be heard, um, or to be hugged? And I wonder, just taking what we've talked about today, one of the questions that is coming up for families is about visiting their home sites after the fire. And I wonder what your thoughts are. I know that for some families, that's an important part of being able to move through the process, being able to maybe do some ritual, do some grieving. Um, and children and teens both are often asking and saying, I want to go see. Um, what thoughts do you have about figuring out for parents what to do and how to prepare and how to navigate with comfort and control, flexibility and compassion, those requests and that process?
Do you want,
Jump
I
in.
can jump in? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll just say to one thing, I think, I'm a big proponent of helping parents develop a cope ahead strategy around anything that they're feeling a little bit worried about their child experiencing. And for a little one, we might talk with them about not just, and as parents, we're really good at coping ahead with logistics, right? We bring the jacket if it's cold, we'll have the snack in the car because they'll be hungry. We'll refill the water bottle the night before to have it ready the morning of. What the other piece that I would encourage to think about is how are we going to cope ahead with the emotion? So if you are going back to your home, this place of your home, and it's going to look a certain way, and you may have pictures or not, is to imagine out loud with your child before they go. What might we do if we start to feel worried or sad? What could I do? And so you're just going to talk that out with them a little bit. Oh, maybe they have a favorite stuffy they could bring with them that helps soothe them, right? Comfort. What can bring us comfort? How might you, if you feel like you are getting scared, what can you tell me? Can you say, Mommy, I'm scared. Can we go back in the car? And guess what? Well, I'll do that. We'll go, so just walk them through what they might feel and make a plan around it. I would highly recommend a closing ritual of some sort, or just like you said, Dr. Johnson, a way to sort of say goodbye or make a closure around it that could be helpful, and then get them involved because that's part of the control, right? We have some control over what we can add memories to share. So I'll just say add those pieces about what might be a good idea in terms of going back to the place of your home.
Dr. Chiang.
I would second that and also say, especially just as someone who works with younger kids, I always like to set them up for success, even in how I'm describing what it is that we are about to do. So I might tell my child, Not that we're going to go see our home. I might say we're going to see where our home was if we know that our home is not standing, right? Just so that the child understands or has a better picture of what to expect. So setting them up for success in that way. And I'm not sure if I don't think I mentioned in the very beginning in introductions, I am not, unfortunately, from Pasadena, but I'm from Northern California. And a few years ago, we also experienced horrific wildfires. And one of the things that we did with our patients and families when they went to go see their homes was they took with them either um, you know, jars or containers, and they even kept some of the pieces. Now, listen, I'm not sure if it's safe. I don't know, even if it's from the soil, or maybe there's still plants that are around that you can take with you and replant somewhere else. But for them, it did seem to bring some sort of closure, and the child felt like they had a piece of something that was really important to them. So I think that that's what also we're thinking about the closure, right, of everything.
I would also say this decision may also be very different for each family depending on the emotional sort of makeup of their child. If you have a kiddo that you feel has always been pretty highly sensitive and can be very much dysregulated by like the sensory piece of it, the smell, the sight, the feel of it. You just want to be cautious and think through it a little bit more. So that might be talking about it in small bits and in a long, maybe more than a week. Like you just want to make sure you're taking smaller steps towards that, or deciding for yourself, is this something that's going to be helpful for my child? Will it make a long lasting impact? So it just depends on the way your child sort of is wired. And some children, it's going to be very healing and very appropriate and can be something that they really, really need. And then for some children, it could be a little bit too much. So I think that's a question a lot of parents are asking themselves, even of teens that just feel like they want to get back and see it, but aren't perhaps ready. And the visual of it is very triggering and can create a traumatic effect of scary imagery that just sticks with them and can impact sleep and those types of things. So if you're needing support making that decision, definitely you can reach out for parent consultation and support around that and thinking through, is this the right fit for my kid?
Thank you, both of you. I think one of the things that comes up for me is thinking about how often as parents, there's the desire to protect our children
Mm-hmm.
from pain and suffering. It's a very, very deep impulse.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea of being sad together purposefully can be a lot to hold. And so when you say cope ahead, Dr. Chiang, I'm thinking even how important for parents to do their own work around coping ahead and reflecting on how it is okay to be sad together, as you were saying, as you both have been saying today. It's okay to have those big feelings, those sad feelings, and to be able to narrate through that together.
Yeah.
And it's all in the service of building resilience, helping our children build resilience within themselves and in their sense of community. I think that's the other thing that really stands out, is how much of this work is relational. That we're doing it as a family, we're doing it as friends, we're doing it in community. I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat. I wonder if anyone just wants to unmute themselves to ask a question. We're also happy to take questions that way. You know where to reach us. We will be in touch in a couple of days with a follow-up email with more resources. We're really grateful to have spent this time with you, and we all wish you all well. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye. Thank you for being here.
Bye. Thank you.